Xin chào mừng quý vị đến với talk show Thành sự tài nhân trong chuỗi chương trình Chìa khóa Trường Thịnh lãnh đạo kế nhiệm do công ty nhân lực L&A đồng tổ chức với tạp chí Kinh tế Sài Gòn Times Club và được sự hỗ trợ của Hawi, Hội Nữ Doanh nhân Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, Hội Doanh nhân vàng của YBA. Chúng tôi xin được cảm ơn công ty Chìa, công ty Nhựa Duy Tân và tập đoàn giáo dục New Zealand Education đã giúp chúng tôi thực hiện chương trình này. Xin cảm ơn. Xin hân hoan chào đón quý vị đến với chương trình talk show Thành sự tài nhân. Và hôm nay thì tôi xin mời các vị sẽ trao đổi với một vị diễn giả từ Singapore. Và nội dung thì chúng ta sẽ có 4 mục chính. Thứ nhất đó là cách mà anh ấy đã phát triển năng lực lãnh đạo cho bản thân, cũng như là phát triển năng lực lãnh đạo cho đội ngũ kế thừa của mình như thế nào khi mà họ phải làm việc rất là nhiều nơi trên nhiều quốc gia khác nhau. Thứ hai đó là kỹ năng cần cho giới trẻ để họ có thể thành công trong tương lai với hậu dịch và môi trường chuyển đổi số. Điểm thứ ba đó là cách mà gia đình và nhà trường có thể phối kết hợp để có thể phát triển được năng lực lãnh đạo cho thanh niên ngay từ lúc mà họ còn ngồi trên ghế nhà trường. Và cuối cùng là những kỹ năng mà các lãnh đạo doanh nghiệp cần phải phát triển cho bản thân và cho công ty của mình để có thể sống và làm việc một cách hiệu quả trong mùa hậu dịch với môi trường chuyển đổi số, có thể tận dụng được công nghệ thông tin và công nghệ nhân sự. Xin cảm ơn quý vị và bây giờ xin quý vị gặp anh Ben Burrows. So please meet Mr. Ben Burrows.
Kia ora. Hello.
Okay, Ben, so how's the weather like in Singapore at the moment?
Very hot. It's always very hot here.
I see. And you are still working from home, right?
I know. I'm back in the office now, so I'm working here in the New Zealand High Commission in Singapore. So lucky to be back working in the office, out of the home bedroom office.
I see. Lucky you. Okay, so let's introduce yourself briefly to the audience so they know what you are doing nowadays during the social distancing and COVID-19.
Sure. Yeah. Kia ora. Thank you. My name is Ben Burrows. I am the Regional Director Asia for Education New Zealand. Education New Zealand is the New Zealand government agency responsible for international education. So I'm born and bred in New Zealand, but have been living and working in Singapore for the last about 12 years. So I'm responsible for a team of 10 colleagues based across Asia who essentially promote New Zealand as a study destination, which has obviously been very challenging during COVID with the limited international travel. But we also focus really heavily on facilitating partnerships for New Zealand in the education space. So that's at both an institution and government level. So we certainly do a lot of work around that in Vietnam. And on the home front, I'm also responsible for another team of 6 others with my wife, Kelly, and 5 young children.
Wow, how brave are you?
Yeah, brave is one word. Many other words to describe that. Maybe, yeah, but no, it keeps me very busy.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work working from home with so many kids around. Yeah, good. Seems that you are working with a team spreading around countries in Asia. Please share with us what are the key problems for you in developing the succeeding leaders among your team?
Yeah, sure. To be honest, it's probably one of my favourite parts, I think, of my job is developing others, and one of my favourite parts of being a leader. I think, to me, the success of your individual team members is a pretty accurate measurement of the job you are doing as a leader. So I think, personally, I think it's really important to firstly identify opportunities for your team members to really stretch themselves. And to take on projects that they wouldn't necessarily manage in their day-to-day jobs. So, throughout my, I think, experience as a leader, I've had no problem with the fact that certain team members have specific skills and attributes that I just don't have. And I think it's important, firstly, to identify those specific skills that they have, and then identifying opportunities for them to put those skills to use. So oftentimes they're not learning more about the skills that they already have, but they learn more about the soft skills required to take on a leadership role. So that encompasses a huge amount. It might be dealing with different personalities, or people who have different ways of working. And it might be just simple skills like listening. And I think it's those little skills that go a long way. And it's not often you can actually put them into practice unless you're given, a real world project to lead and you actually have to put them into action.
Right.
Yeah, so I'd say, so giving others genuine ownership of a project and then empowering them to manage it from start to finish. And as a leader, you're always there in case they need someone to ask questions of. But yeah, for me, I think you just really need to show the confidence in their ability to get the job done, and then instilling that confidence, I think, is key to building their success.
Great. But can you share with us kind of memorable experience in developing your people?
Memorable experience. Yeah, look, I think it's, I know it's always difficult to single out specific ones, but I think it just what I mentioned around individual projects. So if someone is working at a country level, for example, so if we're talking about Vietnam, our team there are very busy with their day-to-day work to deliver a work program in Vietnam. But if giving them the opportunity to lead something on a more regional scale, so for example, she won't probably like me naming her by in particular, but Van led a regional event for us in July, which was essentially bringing together a huge number of our markets across different languages and delivering a virtual event, a virtual B2B event. So for me, I take real enjoyment in identifying those opportunities and seeing someone like Van really flourish in that role and then grow as a leader. And like I said, having the exposure to working with different people from different cultures, different personalities, and managing that. And I think that's an example I look back on fondly.
Van is awesome. You're very lucky to have her in your team.
I am
like
very
her
lucky.
Very much. Yes. So with your very rich experience in international education, can you tell us and the audience what kind of skills will be critical for the success in the future for the youngster? And if you can share some showcases in New Zealand, it would be the best.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because everyone knows that the skills required for the future are changing so quickly. But I think the focus for us in New Zealand is going back to those soft skills I just mentioned. So to give you a proper example, so the Economist Intelligence Unit, so they develop something that they call the Educating for the Future Index, and it compares how education systems around the world are best preparing their students for the future. And what the index is very clear about is that young people need to acquire a range of soft skills that will be key to the future of work. So that's around critical thinking, creative and analytical skills, leadership skills, digital and technical skills, and then also global awareness. And it does say, and the index did report that New Zealand students in New Zealand are among those most likely to acquire these skills, thanks to a whole different combination of policy, assessment frameworks, and also cultural factors in New Zealand. But what those skills also do is they enable someone to continue learning. So we're creating lifelong learners. So as I said, the skills required will continue to change. The workforce will continue to have changing needs. So it's essentially developing graduates who know how to learn and know how to learn on the go, so they can adapt, like I said, to what really is a rapidly evolving workforce.
Yes, those skills are very, very cool for the new normal when each person have to work with more tech savvy capability. Look at me now. I'm carrying a lot of things that I've never have a chance to do so technically and administratively. Multitasking, multifunctional. Okay, good. Yeah, and I'm curious about the building and breeding of leadership for the youngster. I believe that leadership need to be built very early in their development, personal development. What kind of support or what kind of support mainstream education have parents and the youngsters in this regard?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it's probably a challenging one in this day and age, and this is just my personal opinion. But I mean, from the outset, I think, and New Zealand I think does this well, is encouraging our young kids to think for themselves from a very early age. Of course, they need support, but it's giving them the opportunities to think independently. So it's for me, it's a really different approach from giving them everything on a platter. So I'll give you an example. So for when I was a young kid at school, and I don't want to be the guy who talks about back in my day, but you know, kids were entirely responsible for making sure all their work was completed, all the homework was done, and it wasn't the responsibility of the parent. The parent would certainly help, but I think there's been quite a shift in some places in that respect. So, you know, if I think about my own children's classrooms, all the instructions are sent out to the parents' WhatsApp group. The parents are responsible for ensuring their children do what they're told to. But to be honest with you, I don't even really engage with those WhatsApp groups, and because I want my kids to think for themselves. I want them to understand what their responsibilities are. Otherwise, I think, again, we sort of create more of a follower mindset instead of developing true leaders who can think and manage things on their own. So, and I think tied to that, I mean, what we do in New Zealand, our school system, if I focus on our school system, it's really built around an inquiry-based model of teaching. So, like I said, it encourages students to be critical thinkers, problem solvers, so they're not handed everything, they have to work it out themselves. And that also includes a lot of project-based learning, where it provides students with the opportunity to lead a group. And again, like I said, going back to what I said earlier, managing different personalities or different ways of working. So these kids are working in groups, they have given an assignment, or they develop their own assignment, and they have little choice but to think for themselves. So I think that's hugely important. And so, as well as, you know, learning essential academic skills, you know, they're encouraged and supported to develop as individuals, think independently, think creatively, and also think analytically, and not be so dependent on the teacher. I think that, for me, that's a really important step in a young kid's journey to becoming a leader at some stage.
Awesome, yeah. And as COVID is still out there, students can't stop learning. And what New Zealand education and New Zealand institution leverage the digital transformation to offer study options for the international students?
Okay. Yeah, I think, to be honest, the use of digital technology in the classroom has now just become an absolute necessity, and not just in New Zealand, but all over the world, where people do have access to digital tools. And I think, as a country, New Zealand is a top user of digital devices for learning. You know, if you compare that to the OECD and most English, speaking countries. And so the majority of New Zealand students are taught digital skills to help them navigate, you know, online information. And again, it's no secret that those skills will become increasingly important for the future workforce. So like you asked, that applies to both our domestic and international students. So during if we're speaking specifically about COVID or during the pandemic, our digital framework also enabled our students and teachers to continue learning online, and the transition, while it certainly wasn't perfect, it was very successful. So we were set up for success from the outset. And I think we're also very fortunate in New Zealand that we do have a number of world-leading education technology companies whose products have really been instrumental and continue to be instrumental to the success of our digital classrooms. But if there's one point to really highlight here is in New Zealand, we want our young kids to not only just be users of digital technology, but also creators. So they're learning, coding and other, really essential digital tools and skills to enable them to not just use the platform, but create some things as well.
I see. So it seems that they start to practice what they learn in their real study life and get prepared for the future with all the required technical skills for the digital transformation. Okay, good. Now back to you a little bit. What leadership competencies do you have to differentiate yourself away from the other leaders?
It's a good question. I mean, I think, and I mean, perhaps it's one I think I perhaps have, but it's also one that I look for in others, and that's a key competency I think is the ability to build relationships. So for me, that's the absolute, I guess, building block of any professional leader. And I'm sure anyone listening has had a leader that either, A, is genuinely interested in you as a person, it knows, he or she knows, about you, what drives you, and has a genuine interest in also your personal life. And then I'm sure people have had leaders who show very little interest whatsoever in getting to know you as a person, or invest very little time into learning to what motivates you. So from my own personal experience, I'm much more likely to be motivated by a leader I've built a personal relationship with, and I've taken the time to get to know me as a person. And I think with that as well, I think it's also vitally important for a leader to show they're not afraid to, roll their sleeves up and do work that might not be expected of them, or do work on a project that some might consider to be below their position. But to me, that's a trait of a really inspiring leader, and something that's always stood out amongst leaders that I've worked for. So I think I've been able to take some of that learnings from leaders and hopefully been able to apply that in my leadership role for the team I manage.
Thank you for sharing. Yes. And I think culture will groom the leader, and a leader will frame the culture. Can you share with us what kind of cultural values that New Zealand can add to the new generation of young leaders so they can bring back to the world after that study with New Zealand?
Yeah, this is something I could talk for days about. I think we're quite a unique culture, unique to our country. For those of people who are aware, the Māori people, the Indigenous people of New Zealand, have a very special, very unique culture, and they often talk about two core values, and those are manaakitanga and kaitiakitanga. So manaakitanga, it's like a lot of Māori words, it's got many layers of meaning, but at its heart, the term refers to the need for reciprocal hospitality and respect between different people, and also different groups and cultures. And then the second one, kaitiakitanga, that's one that's more sort of tied, I guess, more closely to your question, but it's I guess how we can support the new generation of leaders and how they can contribute back to the world. So in English, kaitiakitanga basically translates to guardianship and protection. So it's a way of managing the environment based on a Māori worldview. And so basically a kaitiaki is a guardian. So to try and explain it a bit, so in the Māori worldview, people are closely connected to the land and nature. So kaitiakitanga is based on the idea of humans as part of the natural world. So for me, it's such a really inspiring value. And it dates right back to when the Māori followed traditional practices when they were hunting, fishing, growing, finding food, and basically allowed them to care for the environment. So if you don't, I'll go into a bit more detail to explain it. But for example, they introduced rahui or temporary bans on taking food from a specific area. They used the lunar calendar to decide when to plant, when to harvest. They only took what was needed. Hunting and fishing was only for food. It wasn't a sport. They used bird snares at the right time. So not when birds were breeding, for example. They didn't hunt any birds during the breeding season. And then in a more modern sense, kaitiakitanga is demonstrated by humans understanding relationships between themselves and the environment in which they live. So people are part of the environment, not superior to it. So I can give you a whole bunch of examples, but it's a really long-winded way of saying that leaders can be guardians and they should leave something in a better way than what they found it. So one example, the All Blacks is our national rugby team. They always talk about they wear a black jersey. They talk about the fact that they are only guardians of the jersey and they want to, it's not theirs, but they leave it in a better place than what they found it or when they were given it. So it's those values really resonate around the world, and particularly a lot of our Indigenous students, when they're exposed to the Māori cultures, it's something that really resonates and sticks with them, because it's all ideas about preservation, sustainability, conservation, both for the present and future generations. And I think that's something that's pretty special and can hopefully, stick with our future leaders, and they can take those back. If they're a Vietnamese international student, for example, hopefully those values stay with them and they can take them back to Vietnam as they continue through their professional and personal lives.
Yeah, caring for the earth and living near the nature is very important for the digital life in the near future, especially for the kids over here. They stick to the screen, and it's a big struggle for families to separate them away from those things. I believe that that's the signature of New Zealand, and that's why so many parents and students choose to study there. Okay, I have another little question, because it seems that we have to live with COVID for a long while ahead. And companies, leaders, people in the company mostly have to engage themselves in either hybrid or work from home style. How companies can develop the skill, or what kind of skill companies need to develop for their leaders to champion the new normal with the digital transformation and working from home?
Yeah, really good question, and it's not an easy one to answer. To be honest, I think if I can try and answer it, is again just my own personal question, but it's for leaders. It's employing those. I always keep going back to the soft skills, but they're absolutely crucial. I gave one example earlier around listening, or understanding the challenges that their team members are facing. It's a hugely difficult situation which everybody is going through, particularly when the line between work and the home life becomes more and more blurred. Particularly when you're working from home, you're getting up, checking emails, you're sort of on call 24/7. So to me, I think it's just understanding the fact that everybody is trying to balance home and work life. So it's just that understanding, the ability to balance or to build a personal relationship. Again, it goes back to that you would hope as a leader you've already built those relationships with your team members pre-COVID. and you then have the ability to have those honest and open conversations. And I think it's just, as a leader, understanding that not everything's going to be perfect. It is a new normal, like you said. Workloads have changed, and I think expectations of what can be delivered by someone when they have everything else going on with their home life needs to be considered. So for me, I mean, I certainly don't know the perfect answer to it, but it's just understanding that it is a completely new environment. People are working in really challenging conditions, and there just needs to be a lot of compassion shown throughout the team.
Yeah, because we see that work tech or human resource technology is spreading around, and that can help to motivate people to engage and to work together better, as you say, and also help companies to drive the result, even though we have to spread our workforce around. Thank you very much for your sharing and your time.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity to have a discussion.
Great, and hope to talk to you or meet you in person soon.
Yeah, I look forward to getting back to Vietnam at some point.
Xin cảm ơn quý vị đã lắng nghe phần chia sẻ của anh Ben Burrows. Và như vậy là chúng ta vừa chia tay với anh ấy những cái điểm mà chúng ta có thể tóm lại từ phần chia sẻ của anh có lẽ là những điểm như sau. Thứ nhất đó là anh đã có một sự nỗ lực nhìn nhận bản thân một cách thẳng thắn để phát triển bản thân mình, và đồng thời giao trọng trách cũng như là tạo điều kiện cho lãnh đạo kế nhiệm của mình có thể phát huy bằng cách trải nghiệm trong công việc, từ tư duy, từ phát triển và tạo một cái sự tự tin hơn cho họ trong công việc, từ đó phát triển được kỹ năng lãnh đạo của họ. Thứ hai là với giới trẻ thì anh cho rằng phụ huynh và nhà trường nên tạo cho họ những cái cơ hội để làm việc cùng với nhau, tăng cường các kỹ năng giải quyết vấn đề, các kỹ năng mềm để họ có thể sống và làm việc tốt hơn với nhau, và với môi trường trong tương lai mà chúng ta sẽ làm việc rất là nhiều trong kỹ thuật số cũng như là làm việc cùng với nhau trên nền tảng công nghệ, để cho các công ty có thể phát triển được năng lực cho đội ngũ cũng như là cho bản thân lãnh đạo doanh nghiệp có thể sống và làm việc trong môi trường kỹ thuật số với sự hỗ trợ của công nghệ thông tin và công nghệ nhân sự. Thì anh cho rằng các doanh nghiệp cần phải có một cái sự thấu hiểu nhau hơn, tạo một cái môi trường để mọi người có thể đồng cam cộng khổ với nhau mặc dù làm việc từ xa, và đẩy cái tính cân bằng giữa công việc và gia đình, cuộc sống, và đẩy mạnh sự cân bằng giữa cuộc sống và công việc để mọi người có thể đồng hành với nhau vượt qua đại dịch, làm việc trong mùa giãn cách một cách hiệu quả. Xin cảm ơn tập đoàn Chìa, công ty nhựa uy tín và tổ chức giáo dục New Zealand Education đã giúp chúng tôi thực hiện chương trình.